Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something truly mind-bending? Today, we're going to explore the wild idea that blockchain technology might be a sign of humanity evolving. Like literally evolving, as in like next level human evolution.
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept for sure. And what's really wild is that it's not just some fringe theory either. We're actually basing this whole deep dive on an academic paper that connects blockchain to the concept of humanity becoming like a superorganism.
Okay, superorganism. I
Mhm.
gotta say, that sounds pretty intense. Can you break it down for me? Like, what does that even mean?
So the paper draws on the work of this guy, Nate Hagens. He's the one who argues that humanity as a whole operates a lot like a massive organism,
Okay.
constantly growing and consuming resources. The catch is that our current path, this whole endless growth thing that we're on, might not be sustainable.
Yeah, that makes sense. So where does blockchain fit into all of this? Is the paper saying that blockchain is like some kind of technological savior?
Well, it's not quite that simple. The paper suggests that blockchain, because it's decentralized, could be a big part of helping humanity move to a more balanced system, a more sustainable one, too. It even connects this idea to the global brain theory.
Okay, hold on. Global brain.
Yeah, it's this idea that all this tech, like the internet, is weaving together a kind of collective intelligence for humanity.
Whoa. So instead of just being a superorganism that eats up everything in sight, we could like evolve into a more conscious and interconnected entity. That's kind of blowing my mind a little.
It is pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
And there's another layer to this whole thing, too. The paper connects this evolutionary concept to something called spiral dynamics. You ever heard of that?
Spiral dynamics, honestly, it doesn't ring a bell.
So basically, it's this model that describes how human consciousness evolves
Mm.
through different stages.
Hmm.
It starts with like basic survival instincts, and then it moves towards more complex ways of thinking, like more collaborative ways of being.
Interesting. So the paper's suggesting that blockchain could be like this driving force pushing us towards a more advanced stage of development. That's pretty profound when you think about it.
It really is. So we've got superorganisms, global brains, A&D evolving consciousness,
Yeah.
all connected by blockchain. It's a lot to wrap your head around, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you there. I'm still trying to wrap my head around how blockchain actually works in all of this. Like, how does it actually function? The paper mentioned some interesting analogies, right?
Yeah, it does. One that really stood out to me was the one about a young adult gaining financial independence and comparing that to society embracing blockchain.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that.
So picture this, right? You've got this young adult venturing out on their own for the first time. There's this feeling of excitement and freedom, but they also often make some financial mistakes along the way,
Yeah,
like overspending or racking up credit card debt. It's all part of learning how to manage their money, right?
totally. I can definitely relate to that. Early financial independence can be a bumpy ride for sure.
Exactly. And the paper draws a parallel between those financial fumbles and the early stages of the crypto market.
Oh, I see.
You've got incredible innovation and potential, but also a lot of volatility scams and people losing money because they didn't understand the risks.
So as a society, we're kind of stumbling our way through this new financial landscape, just like a young adult figuring things out.
Precisely. And just like parents who worry about their teenager governments are reacting to blockchain with a mix of caution and sometimes heavy-handed regulation.
That makes sense. I guess they see all the ups and downs in the crypto world and think, we need to step in and protect people.
Right. But the paper argues that there might be a better approach.
Hmm.
It's like good parenting. Instead of trying to control everything, governments could create more supportive environments, like regulatory sandboxes, for instance.
Regulatory sandboxes, what are those exactly?
What are those exactly? So they're basically like controlled environments where companies can experiment with new blockchain applications without being bogged down by all these super strict regulations. It's a way to encourage innovation while still making sure things are safe.
So it's about finding that balance, allowing blockchain to grow while also setting some boundaries. Kind of like good parenting.
Exactly. Because just like a young adult eventually learns to manage their money responsibly, society can learn to harness the power of blockchain in a way that's good for everyone.
Okay, so we've talked about superorganisms, spiral dynamics, this financial independence analogy. What other mind-blowing comparisons does the paper make? I'm hooked.
Well, buckle up, because this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
The paper compares the financial system to both the human circulatory system and the nervous system.
Wait, hold on. How can money be like both blood, AD, nerves? That seems like a stretch.
It might sound strange at first, but hear me out. Think of money as the blood of the economy. Just like blood carries oxygen and nutrients to different parts of the body, money carries value and resources throughout society.
Okay, I see the blood analogy, but what about the nervous system part?
Well, at the same time, money also acts like the nerve signals in the economic system. It coordinates activity, transmits information, and lets different parts of the economy communicate.
So money is like this multitasking wonder that keeps the whole economic machine running.
Exactly. And this metaphor really highlights how interconnected our financial systems are.
That's a really cool way to look at it. But where does decentralization fit into all of this? How does blockchain change the anatomy of this economic organism, so to speak?
Well, the paper uses another analogy to explain this transition. It's all about the shift from centralization to decentralization. Think about a baby in the womb. It relies completely on the placenta for all its needs.
Okay.
But as the baby develops, it starts to grow its own independent organs,
Great.
lungs and a stomach.
So you're saying the placenta represents like the government or the banks in our current centralized system, providing essential services, but also controlling everything.
Exactly. And just like a baby eventually cuts the umbilical cord and becomes self-sufficient, the paper suggests that humanity could be moving toward a more decentralized model, one where we don't rely so much on these centralized institutions.
And blockchain and DAOs are the lungs and stomachs of this new system, providing new ways to organize ourselves and manage resources without relying on traditional intermediaries.
You got it. They represent alternative ways of coordinating and distributing resources, power, and decision-making. But to understand this whole decentralization thing a bit more, let's talk about what DAOs actually are.
For those of us who aren't familiar, can you explain what a DAO is and how it relates to blockchain and decentralization?
Sure. So a DAO, or Decentralized Autonomous Organization, is basically a community-led entity that's governed by rules that are encoded on a blockchain. Imagine a company or an organization that operates totally transparently and democratically, without a traditional hierarchy. Decisions are made collectively by the members, and every action is recorded on the blockchain for everyone to see.
So it's like a self-governing organization where the members have more direct control and there's built-in transparency and accountability.
That's a great way to put it. And DAOs are just one example of how blockchain can enable new forms of organization and governance. The possibilities are pretty much endless.
This is also fascinating. It's like we're watching the birth of a whole new way of being human, a more interconnected and self-governing kind of society.
And here's another analogy the paper makes Bitcoin that often misunderstood cryptocurrency is compared to the fat reserves a baby builds up before birth.
Wait, Bitcoin is like .baby fat. How does that work?
Think about it. Those fat reserves are crucial for a baby's survival when it's born.
Okay.
They're a source of energy, while the baby's adapting to a new way of feeding and getting nutrients.
So you're saying that Bitcoin, with its decentralized nature and limited supply, could act as a kind of safety net for society as we transition to a new financial system, like a store of value that people can rely on if the traditional systems go haywire.
That's the idea. Just like those fat reserves help a baby through a vulnerable time, Bitcoin could help us navigate a potentially rocky shift in the financial landscape.
That's a really interesting concept. Is there any evidence that this Bitcoin as a safety net idea is actually catching on?
There is, actually. We've been seeing more and more governments and even some companies adding Bitcoin to their reserves. It's as though they're instinctively recognizing its potential role in a changing world.
This is all incredibly fascinating, but let's get real for a second. The paper paints a pretty optimistic picture of blockchain's potential, but what about the challenges? Doesn't this shift to decentralization also create problems?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Decentralization isn't some magical solution. And the paper acknowledges that, in fact, it goes straight into one of the biggest challenges, the potential clash between our current debt-based financial system and the rise of crypto assets.
Okay, break that down for me. What's the issue here?
Well, our current system is built on debt and the need for constant growth. Banks create money by lending it out, and that debt needs to be repaid with interest. This creates a cycle where we need more and more economic activity just to keep the system going.
I've had people say that this debt-based system isn't sustainable, but how do crypto assets disrupt it?
They offer a different way to store and exchange value that's outside the control of central banks and governments. And if crypto becomes really popular, it could throw a wrench into the gears of the traditional system.
So are we talking about potential economic chaos if crypto takes over?
It's definitely a concern that the paper brings up. If the transition to a crypto-based system isn't handled carefully, it could lead to inflation and make it much harder for governments to manage the economy. We're basically talking about two very different systems potentially clashing.
Okay, so we've got a potential problem on our hands. Does this paper offer any solutions? Is there a way to make this transition smoother and avoid a major economic meltdown?
There is. And this is where we get into some really mind-bending economic theory. The paper introduces something called the relative theory of money, or RTM, as a possible way forward.
Relative theory of money, I'm all ears. Tell me more about this RTM.
It was developed by this mathematician and economist named Stefan Laborde. It's a totally different way of thinking about money. RTM is built around this idea of a universal dividend, or UD, that's given to every single person in the economy.
A universal dividend, so everyone gets free money. That sounds too good to be true.
It's not really about free money. It's more about creating a fairer system. The UD isn't meant to replace work or income. Instead, it's designed to provide a basic level of economic security for everyone.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. But how does this UD actually work? And how does it solve the problems of a debt-based system?
The UD is given out in a special unit of account that's designed to keep its value over time. Think of it like built-in inflation protection.
Interesting. So this UD helps to stabilize prices and prevent the crazy inflation that could happen if everyone started using crypto.
Exactly. And because the UD is given equally to everyone, it helps to reduce wealth inequality too.
This is starting to sound like a pretty amazing future, but can we actually implement something like RTM in the real world?
Well, there's a cryptocurrency called Near that's been experimenting with RTM principles for a few years now. It's a small-scale project, but it gives us some clues about how this system could work in practice.
So this RTM isn't just a theory. People are actually trying to make it happen.
They are. And get this. The growing interest in central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, could actually make it easier to adopt RTM on a larger scale.
CBDCs. I've heard that term, but could you explain what they are for those who might not know?
Sure, CBDCs are basically digital versions of regular money,
Yeah.
issued and controlled by central banks. So instead of using physical cash or traditional bank accounts, transactions would happen directly on a digital ledger managed by the central bank.
Okay, so how do CBDCs connect to the relative theory of money and this whole universal dividend idea?
Some experts think that the systems being built for CBDCs could be adapted to implement RTM principles. Think about it. Central banks would have a direct way to give the universal dividend to everyone. And because CBDCs are digital, it could be easier to manage that special unit of account that RTM uses.
So if our current financial system were to crash, we could potentially switch to an RTM-based system pretty quickly using the CBDC infrastructure.
That's one possibility the paper explores. It's like having a backup plan in case the main system fails.
This is all so mind-blowing. We've covered so much in this first part of our deep dive. Superorganisms, global brains, financial independence, and even revolutionary economic theories. Where do we even go from here?
Well, in the next part, we'll dig even deeper into what this shift towards decentralization really means. We'll explore the good, the bad, and everything in between.
I can't wait. This is like a deep dive into the potential future of humanity. It's amazing. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing. All right, so we're back. And last time we kind of set the stage for how blockchain could be all wrapped up in humanity's evolution as a superorganism. Now I want to get into what does all this actually mean for society? Like, what are the real-world implications of this whole decentralization thing?
That's the big question, isn't it? The paper we're looking at argues that decentralization, the kind that blockchain makes possible, could lead to a way more democratic and equitable distribution of power and resources.
So you're saying it's not just about changing financial systems, it's about shifting power itself.
Exactly. Imagine communities having more say over their own lives.
Yeah.
Decisions being made out in the open and economic opportunities being more evenly spread.
That sounds amazing. It's like taking power back from these huge centralized institutions and putting it back in the hands of the people. But how would that actually work? How does blockchain make that happen?
A big part of it is blockchain's transparency. Everything is recorded on a public ledger that can't be changed. Every transaction, every vote, every piece of data. So that could seriously reduce corruption and increase accountability across the board, whether we're talking about governments, corporations, or even nonprofits.
So blockchain could be like the ultimate weapon against shady dealings and holding the powerful accountable. That's a pretty powerful idea. But I'm also curious about the downsides. I mean, decentralization isn't a magic solution, right? What are some of the risks we need to be aware of?
You're right. No system is perfect. And one of the biggest concerns is that inequality and instability could actually increase, especially during the transition period. As we're moving away from those centralized systems, there's a risk that the people who already have wealth and power could use that to their advantage.
I see what you mean. It reminds me of what happened with the internet. The people who got it first were able to gain a ton of wealth and influence.
Exactly. And with blockchain, there's a similar risk. that early adopters and the tech-savvy folks could become a new kind of elite, making the digital divide even worse.
So how do we stop that from happening? How do we make sure that the benefits of decentralization are shared by everyone, not just a select few?
That's a tough question, and it's something we need to figure out as a society. The paper points to education and access to technology as key factors. If everyone has the chance to learn about blockchain and participate in this new economy, we can lower the risk of creating a new digital aristocracy.
So it's about giving people the knowledge and the tools they need to navigate this changing world. It's a huge challenge, but it seems super important.
It is. And it's not just about technical skills. It's about encouraging critical thinking, promoting digital literacy, and creating a culture that values collaboration and collective decision-making.
Because in the end, this shift to a decentralized future isn't just about technology. It's about how we as humans choose to organize ourselves and relate to one another.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Right.
It's about reevaluating our values, how we govern ourselves, and even our basic understanding of what it means to be part of a society.
Whoa, that's getting pretty deep. I'm starting to see how blockchain is more than just a cool new tech thing. It could be the start of a much bigger societal transformation. But we've talked a lot about governments and institutions. What role can individuals like me actually play in this potential shift?
This is where it gets exciting. Each of us has the chance to be an active part of shaping this future. It's not about just sitting back and waiting for things to happen. It's about engaging with these ideas, experimenting with new technologies, and helping to build more equitable and sustainable systems.
So give me some concrete examples. What can I as an individual do to get involved in this blockchain revolution?
A great first step is to educate yourself. There are tons of resources online and offline about blockchain cryptocurrencies, DAOs, and the whole decentralized scene. Don't be afraid to dive in and explore.
So step one, become blockchain literate.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, especially with all this new stuff. Once you've got the basics down, you can start experimenting. Maybe try using cryptocurrency, join a DAO, or even see about creating your own blockchain project.
I feel like I'm already getting the blockchain bug. But what if I'm not a tech expert? Are there still ways to contribute?
Absolutely. You can support organizations that are working to spread blockchain education and make it easier to use. You can speak up for policies that encourage responsible innovation in the blockchain space. And you can just start conversations about these topics with your friends, family, and community.
So raising awareness, spreading the word, and helping people understand the potential.
You got it. The more people who understand blockchain, the better our chances of creating a decentralized future that works for everyone.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
It's about empowering ourselves and each other to build a better world. But let's be realistic for a second. There's still a lot of uncertainty about how all this will unfold. We don't have a crystal ball, and there's no guarantee that blockchain will live up to all the hype.
You're absolutely right. It's important to be hopeful and realistic at the same time. We're in uncharted territory, and there are definitely going to be challenges along the way.
Sure.
But that's what makes this so exciting. We're exploring what's possible, and we have the power to create a future that's worthy of humanity.
I love that perspective. It's about embracing the unknown with curiosity, courage, and a commitment to making the world a better place. But how do we actually navigate all this uncertainty?
Well, the paper offers some guidance. One key idea is gradual independence. Instead of trying to tear down existing systems overnight, which could lead to chaos, it suggests a more step-by-step approach.
So finding ways to gradually shift power and control from those centralized institutions to more decentralized models.
Exactly. This could involve experimenting with new forms of governance, supporting DAOs and other community-based organizations, and finding ways to integrate blockchain technology into the systems we already have.
Yeah, that seems like a much more stable approach. It's about building bridges instead of burning everything down. But wouldn't some people argue that's too slow? That we need radical change now?
There are definitely people who think we need a revolution. But the paper emphasizes that this transition doesn't have to be about winners and losers. It's not about destroying centralized institutions. It's about finding a better balance of power and creating systems that are more equitable and sustainable.
So it's about collaboration, not confrontation. It's about working together to create a future that works for everyone.
Exactly. And that's a really important point that the paper makes. This shift toward decentralization isn't about creating winners and losers. It's about creating a more inclusive and collaborative society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
I really appreciate that perspective. It's not us versus them. It's about finding a new way forward together. This has been such an eye-opening conversation. What else can you tell us about this potential leap in human evolution?
Well, remember that spiral dynamics model we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
The paper suggests that this move toward decentralization could be what pushes humanity to a higher level of consciousness,
Mhm.
one that's all about collaboration systems thinking and a deep understanding of how interconnected we all are.
So you're saying that blockchain could actually change how we think and how we relate to each other and the world.
Exactly. It's about evolving our consciousness and creating a society that's built on sustainability, equity, and collective well-being.
This is all so inspiring. But I have to be honest, it's also a bit overwhelming. The scale of this potential transformation is huge, and it's hard to know where to even start. What would you say to someone who feels that way?
I totally get that feeling. It's a lot to take in. But remember, this change isn't going to happen overnight. It's a process, and every step we take, no matter how small, can help create a better future.
So it's about focusing on what we can do right now instead of getting lost in how big it all is.
Exactly. Every time we learn something new, every experiment, every conversation, every choice we make can be a step toward a more decentralized and equitable world.
That's a powerful message of hope. It means we have the power to shape our future, and blockchain could be an important tool to help make that happen. In the next part of our deep dive, I'm really looking forward to exploring some specific things our listeners can do to join this journey. All right, so here we are back for the final part of our deep dive into blockchain and humanity's evolution. It's been a wild ride, hasn't it? We've gone from superorganisms to global brains to some pretty revolutionary economic ideas.
It has been quite a journey, that's for sure.
Yeah, my brain is definitely feeling full, but in a good way, Like I've learned so much. So where do we go from here? What are the big takeaways?
Well, if we take a step back and look at the big picture, I think the core message is this. Maybe blockchain is about more than just money. Maybe it's a sign that humanity is evolving to a whole new level.
Like we're on the verge of a massive shift, not just in technology, but in how we think and how we relate to each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if this paper's right, the real question isn't if this transition will happen, but
Yeah.
how will we do it consciously, or will it just kind of happen to us?
That's a pretty powerful thought. It really puts the responsibility on us to make a choice.
It does. And that choice starts with understanding. The more we learn about these new technologies and what they could mean, the better prepared we'll be to navigate this whole thing.
So what can our listeners do to be more involved in this evolution? What are some things they can actually do?
Well, first things first, never stop learning. Don't let this deep dive be the end of your exploration. There's a ton of information out there to help you understand blockchain, cryptocurrencies, DAOs, and all that.
And learning isn't just about reading articles or watching videos, right? It's about trying things out, experimenting, and talking to people.
Absolutely. Share what you're learning with your friends, family, and everyone you know. The more people we bring into the conversation, the better.
Like creating a ripple effect of awareness.
And don't be afraid to jump in and get your hands dirty. Try using cryptocurrency. Join a DAO. Maybe even try building your own blockchain project.
What about those of us who aren't tech experts? Is there anything we can do?
Of course. There are so many ways to participate.
Yeah.
You can support organizations that are teaching people about blockchain and helping them use it. You can advocate for policies that support responsible innovation. And you can just talk about these things with the people around you.
So it's all about raising awareness, spreading the word, and helping people understand what blockchain can do.
Exactly. The more people who understand it, the better our chances of creating a future with blockchain that benefits everyone.
I love that idea. It's about empowering ourselves and each other to build a better world. This has been such an incredible deep dive, full of mind-blowing ideas and questions. But as always, we want to leave you with something to think about.
So here's a question for everyone listening. What role do you want to play in all of this? Do you want to help build a new financial system or a more decentralized society?
The future is being created right now, and we all have the power to shape it.
And if you're feeling inspired to learn more, we've included links to the paper and other resources in the show notes.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.